Okay, let's do a quick review of the Grayscale assignment that you guys just turned in. First of all, I have to tell you, you did some really nice work. There's only a few points to make, so I think we can go through this pretty quickly this time. Maybe it'll be a little shorter than before. So let's start out with this shot. Here we have this nice shot of a flower. Here's the only thing really to watch for it. You've done a nice job. The composition is pretty good, although I would probably tighten it up a little if it were mine. So I really don't have quite so much in the background. I don't need to see all of the flowers in order to get the message here. And I really want you to concentrate. I like your square. I want you to concentrate on the flowers. The only thing I would do is make sure that in these highlight areas where you've got a white subject, it is so easy to get all of that blown out highlights that you've really got to make sure you've got detail like along this petal. So it requires a little extra care. This is right on the edge. It's working okay on the computer, but if you print this or you start converting this for other use, you may well lose some of this detail, which you don't want to do. So you might be a little better off just darkening that a little bit. You really need to pay attention to some of the white areas that are subject to being blown out in a print or in some other output. So I'm just going to show a little bit of what we might do to come in and just pick up some of these lines a little clearer so that you can really see this petal detail. And keep it solid so that you're not going to lose it. Other than that, I think this is fine. You could decide if you wanted to vignette this a little to make the flower stand out or not. That's really a stylistic issue. I would actually adjust this crop very slightly so that I'm not getting this little notch. There we go. So this really is a nice start. So let's move on to the next one. What a nice graphic image this is. Cool doorway, all of these shapes, the tonalities are really nice in here. For some reason, and let me check this, it feels to me like this door isn't square. It's close, but it's not quite there. So what I would do is just stretch that out a little bit so that you could straighten up this doorway. All of these other lines are so perfect. This is so graphic that when you get some little thing out of line, it really starts to show up. So if I do a select all, transform, skew, there we go. That's all it takes. So hit enter, takes it, deselect, and now we have a straight door. And it's just one of those little things that will bug you. You might as well get it over with in the edit. But this is otherwise a really interesting shot. It would be interesting to know which way this door opens, in or out, because if it opens outwardly, it's going to whack into this chair. So I'm assuming it opens inward. Just a thought, just something to look at when you're putting all this together. Well, here we have an interesting problem. This happens a lot when you're resizing your images and not paying attention to the proportions. It's easy to just make it work one way or the other, to expand it, to squeeze it inward. So it's a fairly easy fix. We could fix it just in resizing. We could come into the image size. Here's something to pay attention to. When these little lines do not appear then we are only adjusting one or the other, which is, in this case, which is what I want to do. So I'm going to adjust the height by 200%. See if that gets us close. Yeah, there we go. So now we could tweak that to get it back into the right proportions. Wow, this is a heartbreaking shot. The building, the lamps, everything in here has really nice tonalities. I might want to open up these windows a little bit. Those are a little dark blob holes. Maybe open up these shadows somewhat. In the raw conversion, that would simply been a case of adjusting the shadows. But the real problem with this is the clouds. The highlight area has totally blown out. Possibly, in the raw conversion, if you had used the highlight slider and darkened it, you could have brought detail back into those clouds. But this is a good case where when you're doing the exposure, you really have to pay attention. Remember we did the little zone thing where we talked about the different zones? Well, these areas in here, up in these highlight areas, these should go no lighter than zone 8 or 9. And really 7 would be a little better. But in digital, you could pull it off with 8. So when you're shooting it, make sure you're keeping that within the dynamic range of your chip, and we can make the rest of it work. If you can't, if the difference is too great, then you've got to do it as an exposure blend or an HDR. You've got to be able to pull them together. Here again, this is really a nice shot. The only thing I would suggest doing is you've got a couple of lines that are just way out of whack. The faucet over here, it's out of focus, but it's leaning way over. If we bring our guideline in, we can see it's really off. The edge of that mirror is off. If we looked at the sink line, it's off. So, but it's okay down here. It's pretty good here. So that would be easy to fix. Do a select all, go into edit, transform, skew, and just pull out these lines. So you would pull the bottom out in this direction to correct this. And over here, this also is leaning. Pull this bottom out this way to correct that line. And you're off and running. That's all it would take. Well, this is supposed to be a Hydra. The Hydra in Greek mythology was an incredibly fearsome beast with multiple heads that Hercules had to try to kill. The only problem is when you cut one head off, it grew back 2. So you were kind of defeating your purpose. So this was a really terrific beast. This is a fun, whimsical view of it. The only thing I would do is I think the toning is a little heavy here. So let's see what happens if we just blend it back a little. I'm going to make a duplicate layer. I'll come down on this bottom layer, and I am simply going to desaturate it. Now I'll come back up to our tone layer, and if I want to cut that back just a little bit, all I have to do is go into opacity and blend these a little to where I've got a little bit of tone, but it's not overpowering. This is a really beautiful shot. I love the tonalities down in here in this head of lettuce or whatever this is. This is really, really beautifully done. The only thing that bothers me is all of this black area. If this were going to be a postcard or a poster, then this would be a perfect place for text. Otherwise, we might want to see if we could bring out something in there. I don't know what's back there. If this were in a wooden crate, it would be perfect to have some wood grain back there. But let's see if there's anything there worth recovering. So I'm going to make this my bottom layer. Go into adjustments, curves, and it's in this black that I want to lighten this a little. Really not much. pretty plain. Maybe just a little bit of tone might help. I'm not sure. But I do know that I don't like the way that started to lose that rich, almost duotone. It's warm, but it's more of a duotone look. So I would take and desaturate this a little. So let's go into adjustments, hue and saturation. I'm going to bring it back down to where the original was. Now, use a really light black brush, because I don't know, without any real detail there, I don't know if this is going to work all that well or not. But we'll see. We'll make that a bigger brush. Make that a bigger brush. We'll make sure that it's soft. Maybe just a touch in there, something to bring some life into that area helps us a little bit. But it's very subtle. In the meantime, the rest of this is really, really nicely done. You really captured these tones very well. Here we have an interesting area, habitat conservation, do not go here. Well, okay. Nice fence with the habitat of whatever that is behind us. I can't tell from this whether it's something like a rabbit brush or whatever that is. But the composition is nice. The tones are good. I'm not sure, unless this were part of a story about this conservation area, and this was a descriptive shot to go in that, a narrative shot. I'm not sure what we learned from this, but it's a very well done one. So we'll go on. Nice, very subtle tone job on this, like a duotone of sorts. The only problem I really have with this, you've got some good tones in here. I probably would like to see a little more tone in that tree trunk, maybe a little less silhouetted. There are some really subtle compositional issues, like the tree poking out from behind this sign. But by cutting off the foreground and not giving us any sense of what this intersection is all about, this is really kind of an unresolved shot. I'm not really sure what the shot is about other than the tonalities in it. We've got a nice sky, we've got a nice tree, we've got a nice sign, got a lot of nice things, but they don't necessarily go anywhere together. We need something that's going to tie them together. Well, here we have the nice peer into infinity shot. I think you need to make a decision whether the sky or the pier is really more important in here, or what the message is. If it's the movement into nothingness, then in kind of a bizarre way, the sky is more important. So if that's the case, then we need to give it a little more space. So what I would do is then come in and eliminate some of that foreground bridge and give us a lot of the sky. This banding, by the way, is JPEG artifacting. It's another good reason not to work in JPEG until it's your final image. Now, if it was the pier itself that was critical, then I would come in and suggest we crop from the top and bring it down to maybe there, and give the pier itself a little more oomph to work with. And I'm going to put that center just slightly off center in the shot to add a little dynamics to it. So there's several ways you could go in this shot. Your call. You get to be the artist, but you need to move it off of that dead center kind of static composition. There's another nice black and white, nice tonalities. There are just two things really to watch for. Number one, you've got the horizon coming in at an angle across here, so all of our ocean water is going to drip off to the left side. So I would straighten that horizon. And subtly, we've got an issue down in here. These highlights in this, these flowers or grasses or whatever it is, are being blown out. And you want a little bit of detail. This is so close that I'm guessing you could have pulled that in camera raw, just brought the highlights down a little, and it probably would have solved all of that. Otherwise, this is a nice shot. All of these have been, really. Okay, here's a shot that I'm assuming this is in the Spanish village with all that colored tile. The black and white, in this case, were you doing this for your own purposes? I'm not sure the black and white does much for you. But if it does, if you like the pattern, and this is kind of cool, the different tiles and all, but you would want to open up these shadows a little bit. Simplest way to do that is our old standby with a screen layer. Oh, look, there's all kinds of detail in there. So if we make this into a layer mask, and we'll invert it with a controller, a command I. Now we use a white brush. Let's make that a little smaller. Now we could add back some of that detail. Just enough so that it's not a blob of black. That's always unattractive if you've got this unexplained chunk of pure black in there. You just need to open it up. The best way to do it's an exposure, but if that wasn't the case, then do it here. Opening up that in camera raw would probably have done the job for you. Okay, last one of our section here. Big motion at the museum, I guess, is our topic here. Interesting shot. Up at the Oceanside Museum, there's a collection by Will Gibson, who teaches at Palomar, of people looking at museum work in the museum. That's kind of interesting. His is all in color. This is nicely composed. It's made a really interesting shot, and the way that you've taken something that everybody knows is static and yet have created this motion blur in it is really kind of interesting. I think you did a really interesting job with this. There's not anything I would change. If I were going to get really picky, the only thing I would change, I think, is I would bring this side in just a little, because our motion is going, because of her looking this way, is going that way. So I might cut a little of that off to help that motion. Other than that, I would leave it. So, you guys did good work. Congratulations. We'll be on to the next stuff shortly. So, take care.